The morning sun of Nexus Prime cast long shadows across the crystal towers of the Galactic Defense Academy. Ships from dozens of worlds descended through the atmosphere, carrying the newest batch of cadets to the most important military school in known space. Marcus Chen stood at the viewport of the transport ship, watching the academy grow larger as they approached. His hands were steady, but his mind raced. 3 months ago, he had been a simple security officer on a cargo vessel. Now he was here, representing all of humanity at the galaxy's most prestigious military institution. The transport landed with a soft thud on the Academy's main platform. Marcus grabbed his single bag and followed the other passengers toward the entrance. Around him, beings from across the galaxy moved in groups. The tall, crystal-skinned Zephyrians walked with elegant steps that made musical sounds. The four-armed Korthani moved in perfect formation, their tactical minds already analyzing everything around them. Small groups of collective drones hummed softly to each other, sharing thoughts through their hive connection. Marcus felt very alone among them all. The Academy building rose before them like a mountain of metal and glass. It had trained the greatest military minds for over 2 centuries. Every major battle in galactic history had been won by graduates of this place. Now for the first time, a human walked through its doors as a student. The entrance hall was massive. Thousands of cadets from hundreds of worlds gathered for the opening ceremony. The noise was incredible, dozens of different languages mixing together, creating a sound like nothing on Earth. Marcus had heard recordings of galactic assemblies before, but being in the middle of it was overwhelming. He found a spot near the back and tried to stay quiet. The other cadets around him were already forming groups based on their species. It was natural, he supposed. They shared languages, cultures, ways of thinking. Marcus had none of that here. A Zephyrian cadet near him spoke in the common galactic language. The orientation will begin soon. Each species will be called to receive their assignments. Marcus nodded politely. The Zephyrian's voice was like wind chimes, beautiful but alien. Everything here was alien to him. On the raised platform at the front of the hall, Academy officials began to appear. There was Admiral Thexus, a Korthani whose 4 arms moved in complex patterns as he spoke with his assistants. Commander Zelak, a massive Bronthari whose thick hide showed scars from a dozen battles. And at the center, Director Valen, a Zephyrian whose crystal skin glowed with an inner light that showed her centuries of experience. The ceremony began with the traditional songs of each major species. The Zephyrians created haunting melodies with their crystal bodies. The Korthani performed a complex rhythm with all 4 arms. The collective drones hummed in perfect harmony. Other species added their own sounds to the mix. When it came time for the human representative, Marcus felt hundreds of eyes turned toward him. He had been told to sing something from Earth, but standing there alone he felt foolish. Instead, he simply stood at attention and remained silent. The hall seemed to understand and moved on. Director Valen began her welcome speech. Her voice carried easily through the massive hall. Translated into dozens of languages by the universal communicators every cadet wore. "Cadets of the galaxy," she began, "you are here because your worlds have chosen you as their finest. You represent the future of galactic defense. In these halls you will learn not just tactics and strategy, but how to work together despite your differences." Marcus listened carefully. The words were meant to be inspiring, but he could not shake the feeling that he did not belong here. Every other species had sent their best and brightest. Earth had sent him because he was the only human who had survived what the galaxy now called the Battle of Kepler Station. The director continued speaking about the Academy's history and traditions. She talked about famous battles and the graduates who had won them. Marcus knew some of these stories from his studies, but hearing them here made them feel more real. "This year," Director Valen said, "we welcome cadets from 147 worlds. Among them, we have our first representative from the planet Earth." A murmur went through the crowd. Marcus felt his face grow warm. He had hoped to avoid attention for at least the first day. "Cadet designation 847 Terra, please step forward." Marcus felt his legs move before his mind caught up. He walked through the crowd, which parted to let him pass. The walk to the front of the hall felt like it took forever. His boots echoed on the crystal floor, the only sound in the suddenly quiet space. When he reached the platform, Director Valen gestured for him to turn and face the other cadets. Marcus did as instructed, looking out at thousands of alien faces staring back at him. "Humans are new to our galactic community," the director said. "They have much to learn about warfare on a galactic scale. However, recent events have shown that they may also have much to teach us. The hall remained eerily quiet. Marcus could feel the weight of every gaze upon him. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed doubt. A few showed something that might have been fear. That was when he heard it. A whisper from somewhere in the crowd, spoken in the common language but loud enough for many to hear. That is him. The human from the battle footage. The whisper spread like fire through the hall. More voices joined in, and the whispers became a low rumble of conversation. Marcus saw recognition dawn on face after face as cadets remembered the security recordings that had been broadcast across the galaxy. The Battle of Kepler Station. The cargo ship under attack. The human who refused to surrender when all logic said he should. Director Valen raised a hand for silence, but the damage was done. Every being in that hall now knew exactly who Marcus Chen was and what he had done. The human who had faced impossible odds and somehow survived. The human who had killed Void Reapers with nothing but his hands and whatever he could find around him. As Marcus walked back to his place in the crowd, the hall parted before him once again. But this time it was different. This time the other cadets stepped back, not just to let him pass, but because they were not sure what else to do. Marcus found his original spot and stood at attention as the ceremony continued. But he could feel the eyes still watching him, could hear the whispered conversations in languages he did not understand, could sense the mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity that followed him like a shadow. The ceremony ended with assignments being distributed. Marcus received his datapad and checked his room assignment and class schedule. Everything looked normal, just like any other cadets. But as the crowd began to disperse and head toward their dormitories, Marcus knew that his time at the academy would be anything but normal. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed to their limits. Now they would watch to see what humans could learn when given the chance. Marcus shouldered his bag and followed the signs toward his dormitory. Behind him, the great hall slowly emptied, but the whispers about the human from the battle footage continued to echo off the crystal walls. His real education was just beginning. 3 months earlier, the cargo vessel Earthbound drifted through space on a routine supply run to the outer colonies. Marcus Chen walked his security rounds through the quiet corridors, checking locks and monitoring systems. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The ship carried medical supplies, food packages, and basic equipment to human settlements on the edge of known space. Nothing valuable enough to attract pirates, or so they thought. Marcus had been making this run for 2 years without incident. The first sign of trouble came from the bridge. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with controlled fear. "All hands, this is the captain. We have unknown ships approaching. They are not responding to communication attempts. Security team to stations." Marcus dropped his coffee and ran for the security office. His team consisted of 4 other humans, all former military like himself. They had trained for this moment, but none of them expected it to actually happen. The security office's screens showed what the bridge sensors were seeing. 5 ships, black as space itself, moving in a formation that spoke of military training. They were too far away to identify, but Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "Contact the nearest patrol," ordered Security Chief Williams. "Send our position and request immediate assistance." But even as the distress signal went out, everyone knew help was too far away. The nearest military base was 6 hours distant at best. Whatever was about to happen, they would face it alone. The attacking ships closed distance with frightening speed. When they got close enough for visual identification, Williams cursed softly. Void Reapers. Marcus had heard stories about the Void Reapers, but never seen them in person. They were raiders from the dark spaces between star systems, attacking ships and colonies with brutal efficiency. No one knew what species they originally were. Their bodies were so modified with machinery and genetic changes that they barely looked alive anymore. The first shots struck the Earthbound like hammers. The lights flickered and the artificial gravity wavered for a moment before the backup systems kicked in. On the screens, Marcus could see the Reaper ships moving to surround them. "They are not trying to destroy us," Williams said, studying the attack pattern. "They want to board us." Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom again. "Security team, they are cutting through the hull on decks 3 and 5. Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Security teams, hold them as long as you can." Marcus checked his weapon and headed for deck 3 with 2 other guards. Williams took the remaining man to deck 5. As they moved through the corridors, they could hear the sound of cutting tools working through the hull. The first Void Reapers came through the hull like a nightmare, made real. They were tall creatures, their original species impossible to identify under all the mechanical additions. Metal arms replaced flesh ones. Glowing red eyes replaced natural sight. They moved with jerky, unnatural motions that spoke of extensive cybernetic enhancement. Marcus and his teammates opened fire immediately. Their human weapons were not military grade, just standard security gear. The shots hit the Reapers but barely slowed them down. Their modified bodies could absorb damage that would kill any natural creature. The fight in the corridor lasted less than 2 minutes. Marcus watched his teammates fall one by one to the Reapers' superior weapons and armor. When his gun ran out of ammunition, he grabbed a metal pipe from a damaged wall panel and kept fighting. The Reapers seemed surprised by this. Most species, when faced with overwhelming odds, would surrender or retreat. They had advanced sensors that could calculate battle outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. Any logical being could see that continued resistance was pointless, but Marcus was not being logical. He was being human. He fell back through the ship using every advantage he could find. When the Reapers followed him into the engineering section, he vented superheated coolant into the corridor. When they cornered him in the cargo bay, he used the loading equipment to drop shipping containers on them. The ship's security cameras recorded everything. They showed a single human moving through corridors filled with smoke and sparks, fighting creatures that outgunned and outnumbered him with nothing but determination and creativity. In the medical bay, Marcus found a Reaper trying to access the ship's computer systems. The creature turned toward him, raising a weapon that could have cut him in half. Instead of running, Marcus grabbed a cart full of medical equipment and rammed it into the Reaper at full speed. The alien went down, and Marcus used a surgical laser to damage its cybernetic systems. The Reaper made sounds that might have been screams or might have been mechanical failures. Marcus did not stay to find out which. By this time, most of the crew had escaped in the evacuation pods. Marcus could have joined them, but the Reapers were still trying to access the ship's navigation computer. If they succeeded, they would have the locations of every human colony in this sector. He made his way to the bridge where Captain Rodriguez was making a final stand. The captain was wounded but still trying to delete sensitive files from the computer. "Chen," Rodriguez called out when he saw Marcus. "Help me wipe the navigation data." They worked together while the sounds of the Reapers grew closer. The main computer was damaged and the deletion process was going slowly. Too slowly. "There is not enough time," Rodriguez said. "Take the backup data core and get to an escape pod." Marcus shook his head. "You go, Captain. I will hold them here." Rodriguez started to argue, but Marcus was already moving toward the bridge entrance with another piece of improvised weaponry. The captain looked at him for a moment, understanding passing between them, then grabbed the data core and headed for the escape pods. The Reapers reached the bridge just as Rodriguez disappeared around a corner. 3 of them entered, their red eyes scanning for targets. They found Marcus standing in the center of the bridge, holding what looked like a control panel he had ripped from the wall. What happened next was recorded by the bridge security camera and later broadcast across the galaxy. The footage showed a single human facing 3 heavily armed and armored aliens who should have been able to kill him without effort. Instead, Marcus used the bridge's own systems against them. He overloaded the main display, creating a blinding flash that disrupted their cybernetic vision. While they were blinded, he activated the ship's emergency fire suppression system, filling the bridge with thick foam. Fighting in the foam was chaotic and desperate. The Reapers could not use their advanced targeting systems, and their heavy weapons were useless in close quarters. Marcus moved through the white foam like a ghost, striking at damaged cybernetic components and using the bridge furniture as weapons and shields. When the foam finally cleared, 2 of the Reapers were down and the 3rd was retreating. Marcus was wounded and exhausted, but he was alive. The bridge was destroyed, but the navigation data was safe. The Reaper ships withdrew after that, apparently deciding that this particular cargo vessel was more trouble than it was worth. Marcus was picked up by a patrol ship 6 hours later, barely conscious but still breathing. The security footage from the Earthbound was studied by military analysts from dozens of species. They watched it over and over, trying to understand how a single human had survived against impossible odds. The recording showed something that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Most species approached battle as a problem to be solved through superior technology, numbers, or strategy. When those factors were against them, they accepted defeat as logical and inevitable, but humans apparently did not accept inevitable defeat. They fought not because they could win, but because they refused to lose. They used weapons that were not weapons and tactics that were not tactics. They turned their environment into an ally, and their desperation into a strength. The footage spread through galactic communication networks. Military academies used it as a case study. Tactical experts wrote papers about it. The human who refused to surrender became famous across hundreds of worlds. Marcus Chen never wanted that fame. He had simply done what felt right in the moment. But the galaxy had seen something in those recordings that it had never seen before. They had seen what happened when an apparently inferior species refused to accept its limitations. The Battle of Kepler Station, as it came to be known, changed how many species thought about humans. Some were impressed by the display of determination. Others were disturbed by the apparent irrationality of fighting when victory was impossible. All of them agreed on one thing. Humans were unpredictable in ways that could be either very useful or very dangerous. 3 months later, when Marcus stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Defense Academy, every cadet in that room had seen the footage. They had watched him fight with nothing but improvised weapons and desperate courage against enemies that should have killed him easily. Now, they wondered what would happen when that same human was given proper training, advanced weapons, and military support. Some of them were eager to find out. Others were afraid they already knew. The first week at the academy was the hardest of Marcus's life. Every day brought new challenges that seemed designed to test not just his knowledge, but his very existence at the school. His roommate was a Corthani named Zek Forearms, whose real name was impossible for human vocal cords to pronounce. Zek was polite but distant, spending most of his time studying tactical manuals that Marcus could barely understand. The Corthani military tradition went back thousands of years, with strategies and formations that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. Marcus's own military knowledge came from 2 years of basic training and his experience on cargo ships. Compared to his classmates, he felt like a child trying to understand mathematics by looking at advanced physics equations. The morning classes were the worst. Strategy and tactics was taught by Commander Relac, a veteran Zephyrian whose crystal body bore scars from a dozen campaigns. He spoke rapidly in the common language, expecting cadets to understand complex battle formations and supply chain logistics. The Kelvin Gambit, Commander Relac explained, his crystal body projecting a holographic battle scene, requires perfect coordination between orbital bombardment and ground assault forces. The timing must be exact, or the entire formation collapses. Around Marcus, the other cadets took notes and asked intelligent questions. They referenced historical battles and theoretical scenarios that Marcus had never heard of. When Relac called on him to explain how human forces would adapt the Kelvin Gambit, Marcus could only sit in silence. Perhaps, Commander Relac said with what might have been kindness, Cadet 847 Terra needs more time to study our basic tactical principles before attempting advanced formations. The laughter from the other cadets was not cruel, but it still burned. Marcus spent that evening in the library, trying to catch up on thousands of years of galactic military history. Physical training was different, but no easier. The Academy's training facilities were designed for a dozen different species, with adjustable gravity, atmospheric controls, and equipment that could accommodate beings ranging from the massive Brunthari to the tiny, quick skitters. Marcus was somewhere in the middle of the physical spectrum, neither the strongest nor the fastest. But during combat training exercises, something strange happened. The instructors would set up scenarios that were meant to test different skills: stealth, strength, speed, tactical thinking. Marcus consistently failed to meet the standards in any individual category. But somehow he often completed the exercises when other, more physically gifted cadets failed. Instructor Vex, a scarred Corthani veteran, noticed this pattern. After a particularly challenging obstacle course, he called Marcus aside. "Your approach is unusual," Vex said, his forearms making complex gestures as he spoke. "The obstacle at Station 7 is meant to test climbing ability. You failed to climb it properly." Marcus nodded, expecting criticism. "Yes, sir." I could not reach the required height. But you completed the course, Vex continued. You use the maintenance ladder that other species cannot see, because their eyes are focused upward, looking for the proper climbing path. I just used what was available. Sir? Vex studied him with all four of his compound eyes. Yes, that is what is unusual. Most species see a climbing test and think only of climbing. You see a problem and think of solutions. Marcus was not sure if that was a compliment or not, but Vex seemed interested rather than critical. The social aspects of academy life were perhaps the most challenging. The cafeteria was a maze of different dietary requirements and cultural customs. Marcus learned quickly that Zephyrians absorbed nutrients through their crystal skin, and found the idea of consuming solid food disturbing. The collective drones shared all meals as a group experience, making decision by silent consensus. Marcus usually ate alone, which suited him fine until a group of Altarian cadets decided to join him. The Altarians were humanoid but taller and thinner than humans with blue-tinted skin and large dark eyes. We have been discussing the human, said their apparent leader, a female named Kira Shir. Your performance in classes is noted. Marcus looked up from his meal. I am working to improve. No, Kira Shir said, settling into the chair across from him. You misunderstand. We are not criticizing. We are curious. The other Altarians sat down around the table, creating a circle that felt both welcoming and intimidating. The battle footage, continued Kira Shir. We have studied it extensively. Our analysts cannot understand your tactical choices. Marcus set down his fork. This conversation was happening more often lately. I was not following tactics. I was trying to survive. Yes, said another Altarian, but your survival methods were creative. When faced with superior force, most species either surrender or fall back to predetermined defensive positions. You did neither. I improvised. Exactly. Kirishi's large eyes seemed to light up with excitement. Improvisation. Most military doctrine discourages this because it introduces unpredictable variables. But your improvisation worked. Marcus was not sure where this conversation was heading. I got lucky, perhaps. But luck combined with improvisation creates opportunities that rigid doctrine cannot account for. The Altarians exchanged glances with each other in a way that seemed to communicate volumes without words. We would like to study your approach, Kirashu said finally. Perhaps work together on tactical exercises. Marcus agreed, partly because he needed all the help he could get, and partly because the Altarians were the first cadets to approach him as anything other than a curiosity. Their first joint exercise was a disaster. The scenario was a rescue mission. Extract friendly forces from a defended position without causing excessive casualties. The Altarians approached it with careful planning, precise timing, and coordinated movements. Marcus looked at the holographic battleground and saw something completely different. Instead of focusing on the defended position, he noticed that the enemy was using a nearby power station to run their defense systems. Instead of a frontal assault or careful infiltration, he suggested simply cutting the power. That is not the point of the exercise, protested one of the Altarians. We are meant to demonstrate tactical prowess, not find shortcuts. But Kirashir held up a hand. Wait, show us. Marcus walked them through his reasoning. Take out the power station with a small diversionary force. Wait for the defenses to fail. Then extract the friendly forces during the confusion. Simple, effective, and completely contrary to the textbook approach. They tried it in the simulation. It worked perfectly. Interesting, Kirashu said afterward. You bypassed the intended challenge entirely. I solved the problem that was presented, Marcus corrected. The goal is to extract friendly forces. Everything else is just obstacles. Word of this unconventional success spread through the academy. Some instructors were intrigued by the human's approach. Others were concerned that he was not learning proper military discipline. Commander Relak called Marcus to his office after a particularly heated discussion in strategy class. Cadet 847 Terra, Relak began, his crystal body shifting colors as he spoke. Your recent performance has been noted by the faculty. Marcus stood at attention. Yes, sir. You consistently find solutions that are not covered in standard tactical doctrine. This is bounty problematic. Sir, I am only trying to complete the assignments. Yes, but you complete them in ways that suggest standard doctrine is inadequate. Relak's color shifted to what Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. Tell me, do you believe that galactic military doctrine is wrong? Marcus considered his answer carefully. No, sir. I think it is very effective for species who think in certain ways. But humans might think differently. How so? Most galactic doctrine seems to be based on the idea that there are correct solutions to tactical problems. Humans tend to think that any solution that works is correct. Relak was quiet for a long moment. That is a dangerous philosophy, Cadet. It suggests that ends justify means. No, sir. It suggests that flexibility might be more important than perfection. The conversation ended without resolution, but Marcus could see that he had given Relak something to think about. Over the following weeks, he noticed that some exercises began to include more variables and unexpected complications. The Academy was adapting to him as much as he was adapting to it. Not all attention was positive. A group of Bronthari cadets, massive beings whose species had dominated galactic military thinking for centuries, seemed to view Marcus as a threat to proper order. Their leader, Gorak Prime, confronted Marcus after a physical training session. Human, Gorak Prime rumbled, his thick hide scarred from countless battles. Your methods are not honorable. Marcus looked up at the creature that towered over him. I am not sure what you mean. In combat exercises, you use deception and tricks instead of strength and skill. This is not the way of warriors. I use what works, Marcus replied carefully. My strength and skill are not equal to yours, so I must find other advantages. That is the problem, Gorak Prime said. If you cannot win honorably, you should accept defeat honorably. This is the warrior's code. Marcus felt a flash of anger. And if lives depend on my victory, should I let people die for the sake of honor? The question seemed to strike Gorak Prime like a physical blow. The Bronthari military tradition placed enormous value on personal honor and courage. The idea of sacrificing honor for practical results to the training exercise was supposed to be routine. 2 teams of cadets would compete in a simulated planetary assault, with one side defending a research station and the other attempting to capture it. The defending team had all the advantages, prepared positions, defensive weapons, and detailed knowledge of the terrain. Marcus was assigned to the attacking team along with 12 other cadets from various species. Their team leader was Kira Shir, the Altarian who had become something of a friend over the past months. The defending team was led by Gorak Prime, the massive Bronthari who still viewed Marcus with suspicion. The exercise was taking place in the Academy's combat simulation facility, a vast underground complex that could recreate any environment. Today it was configured as a rocky moon with a research station built into the side of a mountain. The attacking team had 6 hours to capture the station, or the defenders would be declared the winners. Marcus studied the holographic terrain map, while Kira Shir outlined their strategy. It was a solid plan. Probe the outer defenses, identify weak points, then launch a coordinated assault on the most vulnerable entrants. But as Marcus looked at the simulation, he felt that familiar itch in his mind. The feeling that there was something everyone was missing. The power source, he said suddenly. Kira Shir paused in her briefing. What about it? The research station has to have external power collectors for solar energy. If we take those out, their defensive systems will switch to backup power, which will be much weaker. A Korthani cadet named Zek shook his head with all 4 arms. That is not the objective. We are meant to capture the station, not destroy its infrastructure. We are not destroying it, Marcus explained. We are just making it easier to capture. The team spent several minutes debating the approach. Most wanted to follow standard assault doctrine, careful reconnaissance, then overwhelming force applied at the weakest point. Marcus's suggestion seemed like cheating to them. Finally, Kira Shir made the decision. We will try both approaches. Marcus, take 2 cadets and target the power systems. The rest of us will probe the main defenses. Marcus chose 2 volunteers, a quick skitter named Pip Click and a technical specialist from the collective named Unit 7. They made an odd team, but Marcus had learned that unusual combinations sometimes worked better than traditional ones. The simulation began at dawn on the rocky moon. The research station sat like a fortress built into the mountainside, its defensive weapons sweeping the approaches with targeting beams. Marcus and his small team circled wide around the main assault area, looking for the external power collectors. They found them on the station's southern face, a cluster of solar collection arrays that fed power into the mountain through heavily shielded cables. The arrays were lightly defended, since no reasonable tactical doctrine would consider them a primary target. "This feels wrong," Unit 7 transmitted through its collective link. "We should be supporting the main assault." "We are supporting it," Marcus replied, "by making it possible." Pip-Click, whose species had evolved for moving through tight spaces, was already examining the power cables. "These are heavily armored. It will take time to cut through them." Marcus looked around the rocky terrain, his mind working through possibilities. "We do not need to cut them. We just need to overload them." He pointed to a maintenance panel on one of the collection arrays. "If we reverse the power flow and feed it back into the collectors, the safety systems will shut down the entire grid." It was not a complicated plan, but it required technical knowledge that was not covered in standard tactical training. Fortunately, Unit 7 had access to the collective memory of its entire species, including detailed information about galactic power systems. While Unit 7 worked on the technical aspects, Marcus and Pip-Click set up a defensive perimeter. Through their communication links, they could hear the main assault beginning. Kirishi's team was making good progress, but the station's defenses were strong. "Power grid destabilized," Unit 7 reported. "Shut down in 30 seconds. Marcus counted down the time in his head. When the station's lights flickered and dimmed, he knew their part of the plan had worked. The defensive weapons switched to backup power, reducing their effectiveness by more than half. "Main assault team, this is Chen," he transmitted. "Defenses are weakened. Now would be a good time." Kirishi's response came through clearly. "Confirmed. Beginning final assault." But as Marcus watched the tactical display, something felt wrong. The defending team was not reacting the way they should. Instead of scrambling to restore power or reinforcing their weakened positions, they seemed to be pulling back deeper into the station. "That is not right," Pip-Click chittered nervously. "Why are they not fighting harder?" Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "Because this is not an exercise anymore." The first explosions came from the direction of the station's main entrance. Real explosions, not simulation effects. Through the communication system, Marcus could hear screams and weapons fire that sounded nothing like training equipment. "All units, this is not a drill," came Commander Rylak's voice over the emergency channel. "The Academy is under attack." "Repeat, this is not a drill." Marcus grabbed his equipment and started running toward the station. Behind him, Unit 7 and Pip-Click followed without question. The simulation had become reality, and real enemies were inside the Academy's training facility. As they approached the station, Marcus could see figures in black armor moving through the corridors. Void Reapers, just like the ones from the cargo ship. Somehow they had infiltrated the Academy during the training exercise. The communication channels were chaos. Marcus could hear instructors trying to coordinate a response while cadets called for help from a dozen different locations. The Reapers had timed their attack perfectly, striking when most of the Academy's defensive systems were shut down for the exercise. "Chen, where are you?" Kirishi's voice came through the static. "We are pinned down in the command center." Marcus checked his tactical display. The command center was 3 levels up from his current position, and the main corridors were crawling with Reapers. A direct approach would be suicide, but Marcus was not thinking about direct approaches anymore. "Unit 7, can you access the station's internal systems? The main computer is damaged, but I can reach some subsystems through the power grid we just compromised." "Good. I need you to map the maintenance tunnels and service corridors. Show me how to get to the command center without using the main passages." While Unit 7 worked, Marcus explained his plan to Pip-Click. The small alien species had evolved in underground tunnel systems, making them perfect for moving through tight spaces. Together they could reach the command center through routes that the Reapers would never expect. "This is insane," Pip-Click chittered. "We are cadets, not soldiers." "Right now we are what we have," Marcus replied. "The instructors are trying to mount a defense, but they are thinking like instructors. The Reapers are thinking like invaders. We need to think like survivors." They entered the maintenance system through a service hatch that was barely large enough for Marcus to fit through. The tunnels were dark and cramped, filled with pipes and cables that made movement difficult. But they also provided perfect concealment from the Reapers stalking through the main corridors. As they crawled through the darkness, Marcus could hear the battle raging above them. The distinctive sound of Reaper weapons mixed with the return fire from Academy defensive systems. Occasionally, the tunnel would shake from nearby explosions. "We are approaching the command center level," Unit 7 transmitted. "There is a service entrance directly below the main room." Marcus paused at the service hatch and listened carefully. He could hear voices above, both familiar cadet voices and the mechanical sounds that Reapers made when they communicated. The command center had been captured, and his fellow cadets were prisoners. Through the ventilation system, Marcus could see into the room above. 6 cadets, including Kirishi, were lined up against one wall. 3 Reapers stood guard while a 4th worked on accessing the command center's computer systems. "They want the Academy's defensive codes," Marcus whispered to his companions. "If they get those, they can shut down all the automated defenses." Pip Click's large eyes reflected fear in the dim light. "What can we do? We are 3 cadets against 4 Reapers." Marcus studied the room layout, his mind automatically cataloging potential weapons and advantages. The command center was designed for training exercises, not real combat, but that might actually work in their favor. "Unit 7, can you access the room's training systems from here?" "Yes, but they are meant for simulations, not actual combat." "Sometimes simulations are enough." Marcus outlined his plan quickly. It was desperate and relied on precise timing, but it was the only chance they had. The Reapers were focused on the computer systems and the prisoners. They would not expect an attack from below, using training equipment as weapons. "On my signal," Marcus whispered, then kicked open the service hatch. He emerged into the command center like a ghost rising from the floor. The first Reaper barely had time to turn before Marcus activated the room's emergency fire suppression system. The Galactic Council met in emergency session 3 days after the attack on the Academy. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in the Great Crystal Amphitheater on Nexus Prime, their faces showing the strain of recent events. Director Valen stood at the center of the amphitheater, her crystal body flickering with subdued colors that reflected her somber mood. Around her, the tiered seats held the most powerful military minds in the galaxy, all trying to understand how their most secure installation had been penetrated so easily. "The investigation is complete," Director Valen announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "The Void Reapers did not stumble upon our academy by chance. This was a carefully planned reconnaissance mission." A rumble of concerned voices rippled through the assembly. Admiral Thexus, his 4 Corthani arms gesturing in agitation, was the first to speak. "Reconnaissance for what purpose? The Academy has strong defenses and little strategic value beyond training." "That is where you are wrong," Director Valen replied. "The Academy's tactical databases contain detailed information about every major military formation in the galaxy. Fleet positions, defensive strategies, even the personal fighting styles of our best commanders." The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. If the Void Reapers had succeeded in accessing those databases, they would have gained enough information to plan attacks against any world in the galaxy. "How close did they come to success?" asked Commander Zelak, the massive Bronthari's scarred hide reflecting his concern. "Very close," Director Valen admitted. "If not for the actions of certain cadets, particularly the human-designated 847 Terra, the mission would have succeeded." All eyes turned to the section where Marcus sat with his fellow cadets. He felt the familiar weight of unwanted attention, but this time it was different. This time he was not alone. Kirishi sat beside him, along with Unit 7, Pip Click, and several other cadets who had fought alongside him during the attack. "The humans' tactical approach," Director Valen continued, "was unlike anything in our traditional doctrine. Instead of mounting a conventional defense, he used improvised weapons and environmental advantages to defeat superior forces. Admiral Kexra, an elderly Zephyrian whose crystal body showed the deep blue of centuries of experience, rose from his seat. "Director Valen, while we appreciate the courage shown by these cadets, I must ask, why are we discussing unconventional tactics in the council chamber? Our traditional methods have served the galaxy well for millennia." Director Valen's colors shifted to a pattern that Marcus had learned indicated disagreement. "With respect, Admiral, our traditional methods failed 3 days ago. The Reapers penetrated our defenses because they knew exactly how we would respond to their attack. Then we must improve our traditional methods," Admiral Kexra insisted, "not abandon them for the chaotic approach of a single species." "Perhaps," said a new voice, "we should listen to what that single species has learned." The speaker was Commander Relak, Marcus's tactical instructor. His crystal body showed the mixed colors of deep thought and uncertainty. The human cadet has consistently demonstrated an ability to find solutions that our traditional training does not cover, Relak continued. During the attack, other cadets began to adopt his methods with remarkable success. Marcus felt Kirashi shift beside him. He knew she wanted to speak, but protocol demanded that cadets remain silent unless directly addressed. Admiral Thexus looked directly at Marcus. Cadet 847 Terra, you have been at the center of these discussions. Do you believe that galactic military doctrine should be changed based on human methods? Marcus stood carefully, acutely aware that his answer might influence military policy for decades to come. Sir, I do not think human methods should replace galactic doctrine, but I think they might complement it. Explain. Marcus took a breath, organizing his thoughts. Every species in this room has strengths that others lack. Korthani tactical precision, Zephyrian strategic thinking, Bronthari courage. Humans bring adaptability. We see problems differently because we approach them without preconceptions. That is precisely the concern, Admiral Kexra interjected. Warfare without doctrine is chaos. Chaos leads to unnecessary casualties and mission failures. With respect, sir, Marcus replied. Rigid doctrine also leads to casualties when it meets an enemy who does not follow the same rules. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Military theorists argued about the balance between structure and flexibility. Combat veterans shared stories of battles won and lost based on unexpected tactics. Political leaders worried about the implications of changing military doctrine that had maintained galactic peace for centuries. Through it all, Marcus sat quietly, listening to beings from across the galaxy debate the value of human approaches to warfare. Some spoke of humanity as a valuable new ally whose fresh perspective could strengthen galactic defenses. Others worried that human unpredictability could destabilize the careful balance of power that kept the peace. Finally, Director Valen called for order. The Council will vote on a proposal to integrate adaptive tactical training into the Academy curriculum. This training would supplement, not replace, traditional doctrine. The vote was closer than Marcus had expected. Many of the older military leaders remained skeptical of changing methods that had served them well. But younger officers and those who had studied the battle footage from both the cargo ship and the Academy attack saw the value in learning new approaches. The proposal passed by a narrow margin. Over the following months, the Academy began to change. New courses were added that focused on environmental adaptation and improvised tactics. Students from different species were mixed together more often, forcing them to learn from each other's strengths. Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. Instead of struggling to keep up with his classmates, he was now teaching some of them. His improvisational tactics course became one of the most popular electives at the Academy. But the real test came 6 months later, when long-range sensors detected a massive Void Reaper fleet moving toward the core worlds. The reconnaissance mission at the Academy had been preparation for a full-scale invasion. The fleet that assembled to meet them was unlike any in galactic history. Traditional battle formations were supplemented by smaller, more flexible units trained in adaptive tactics. Ships carried equipment that could be rapidly reconfigured for different missions. Crews included mixed species teams trained to think creatively under pressure. Marcus graduated from the Academy just in time to join the fleet as a junior tactical officer. But his real role was something new. An adaptive warfare specialist whose job was to find solutions when traditional approaches failed. The battle, when it came, was everything the military analysts had predicted and nothing like they had expected. The Void Reapers attacked with overwhelming force and superior technology, just as their doctrine suggested they would. But they also faced an enemy that no longer followed predictable patterns. Human-trained units struck at unexpected targets using improvised weapons. Mixed species crews found creative solutions to tactical problems that had never appeared in any manual. The Reapers, for all their technological superiority, had planned for a war against enemies who would fight according to established doctrine. They were not prepared for an enemy that treated doctrine as a starting point rather than a final answer. The galaxy won that battle, though the cost was high. But more importantly, they learned something about the nature of modern warfare. In an age where technology could be copied and strategies could be predicted, The most valuable asset was the ability to think differently. A year later, Marcus stood in the same great hall where his journey had begun. But this time he was not a cadet facing uncertain stares. He was an instructor, wearing the insignia of the Academy's new Department of Adaptive Warfare. The incoming cadets looked at him with the same mixture of curiosity and uncertainty that had greeted him. But now there were humans among them, the first class of human cadets to arrive since the Academy had opened its doors to Earth. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "You are here because your worlds have chosen you as their finest. You represent the future of galactic defense." He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces and the handful of human ones scattered among them. "In these halls, you will learn tactics and strategy that have been proven over centuries of warfare. You will study formations and doctrines that have won countless battles, but you will also learn something equally important: how to think for yourselves when the textbooks have no answers." A young human cadet in the front row raised her hand. "Sir, what happens when we face enemies who are stronger, faster, and better equipped than us?" Marcus smiled, remembering asking similar questions not so long ago. "Then you remember that strength, speed, and equipment are not the only factors that matter in a fight. Sometimes the most important weapon is the ability to refuse to accept that defeat is inevitable." The ceremony continued with the traditional songs and presentations, but when it came time for the human representative to add their voice to the chorus, something different happened. Instead of one voice, dozens of human cadets stood together. They sang an old song from Earth,